Hi everyone, it's nice to see you. Move my microphone over here so it's a little closer to me. I hope everyone's had a nice week. I'm going to give people a few minutes to join us on different streaming platforms. I hope everyone's doing well tonight, having a nice Friday, enjoying the beginning of the summer. And it looks like I'm live, and I'm trying to again figure out how to get my chat back. Let me just do it the old way I used to do it. Because they changed Restream and I keep having trouble finding the chat. So let me just open the old one here while I wait for a few people more to join us. Oh, well, I apologize that I'm not able to figure out where the chat went on Restream. It's so embarrassing that I can't find you. This happens to me every week, and you think I would take the time to figure out how to fix it. But I can't. There it is. I found the chat. So if you're here on Facebook and YouTube, say hello. Let me know where you're watching from tonight. It's nice to see everyone. You guys on Zoom, I can see you on Zoom. So I can see everybody here now. Let me admit the last person who's waiting. And it is wonderful to see everyone. A few times now, it looks like I'm a little crooked. Let me sit straight. A few times now, I've mentioned my garden and that I'm working in my garden. So tonight for my background, I'm using a picture of my garden. So here's my garden for everyone to see. So I hope you like that. So you're seeing a picture of Mrs. Q's garden, my real life garden there behind me that I spend a lot of time on. And I spent a lot of time today. I live in New York City. I live in a building that's a co-op, and I've been volunteering to do the gardening for the co-op. So I spent most of my day today changing some plants that are in pots at the entrance to our building. And it came out really, really nicely. So I'm kind of the volunteer gardener for the building. So I find it very relaxing and very rewarding. So thanks for coming out, watching tonight. I wanted to let you know that I'm not going to be seeing you for the next couple of weeks because of some things that are happening in my life and Mr. Q's life. And next Friday, we're going to be traveling because we're heading up to pick up Doggy Q. Some of you saw a picture of him on Facebook, our new German Shepherd puppy, Quintus. And he will be joining us next Friday, so I won't be here. And then the following Friday is my monthly lecture for the Queens Public Library System. So 2 Fridays from today, I will be lecturing at 10 a.m. And I'll send out the link and everything so that you can watch. And that lecture is going to be about Thomas Paine's Common Sense. I did one of these, I think a year or so, maybe 2 years ago. So if you're interested in Thomas Paine's Common Sense and what it's all about and what it meant and the reaction to it and all that stuff and why it's still important to us today, you can join me in 2 weeks, and that's 10 a.m. New York time. I have on my little Madison medallion. I think you can see it here. And so since this is the last time we'll be seeing each other, I got in full makeup, hair, big dress, got poofy back here. I put everything on for you guys tonight since I'm not going to see you in a few weeks again. So I didn't want to be lazy, put on my wig, put everything on, and put on a nice background. So nice to see you all. Okay, someone says Doggy Q is really cute. He is really cute, and we are really anxious to bring him home. Kind of sad without a dog. So tonight's topic is all about the way the people of the colonies were deceived into believing they needed England and the Parliament to survive. And who was in favor of that? who was not in favor of that, and how we came to understand that that was a deception and we really didn't need them at all and we could get along quite well without them. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight. So please, ask me questions and whatever along the way as we go along, and I'll be happy to answer them because I think it's a pretty relevant topic, right? Because the government always wants you to believe you need the government, but maybe sometimes you don't need so much government, or maybe you don't need the government you have. My bonnet is fading in and out here. That's my green screen, my green background. So the colonies, right? The colonies are founded by trading companies, primarily coming over from Europe, most of them from England, but a couple of them from Holland, right? So, New York was one of those. From Holland, the Dutch West India Company founded New York and New Jersey and the region through here. And the purpose of them was to make money. They were, well, okay, maybe not Massachusetts where the Puritans went, okay, because nobody liked the Puritans, right? They didn't like them in England, so they went to Holland. Holland was the most tolerant place in Europe, and they couldn't get along in Holland either. So they mounted an expedition and they came to America and settled up in New England. So they're, up there. But largely the other colonies are founded for financial reasons. Absolutely. The ports of New York, Philadelphia, and in the South are all for financial reasons. So they're supposed to make money. The number one thing to do is make money, and not to make money for the people in the colonies, but to make money for the companies that originally financed their founding. And as time went on, to make money for the Parliament, right? Because the Parliament is spending money and they need more and more tax money. Now, in England, they have a problem in that they only really have one class that's paying taxes, an upper class. Lots of people are peasants. They have no income or very little income, and they're not paying taxes. So once they kind of settled on the colonies, they found this great source of revenue in the colonies. So increasingly in the 18th century, the colonies were more and more about producing revenue for the Parliament. And we did that in a number of ways. Say, for instance, raw materials. Raw materials came from us, went to England, were manufactured and sold back to us at finished goods and sold to us at prime prices. We were forbidden by law from manufacturing any of those items ourselves. And if we bought them from an English competitor, they sailed on English ships and were subject to English taxes, customs, or tariffs, right? So this was protectionism of English manufacturing. So that is the first way that they made money from the colonies, by getting us to buy all their stuff. The second way, of course, was on the tax of goods traveling within the British Empire, customs, tariffs. There was a tax on items when they left a port, and there was a tax when they arrived at the next port. And so the British government, the Parliament, made money on taxes that way. Now, for most of our time as colonies, there were not direct taxations on us. There were those indirect types of taxes that I mentioned, the profits on selling manufactured goods and the tariffs. But increasingly, you probably know that direct taxation will come, and that will begin causing, the rebellion against England. So we exist in the minds of the Parliament for revenue, for profit. That is our goal. The governor's job is to make the colony profitable. And I can tell you most of the governors in New York were an absolute miserable failure at that, because as one of our fine gentlemen said, more and more of the governors coming to New York have no business experience whatsoever. They're just aristocrats looking to make money on their position as governor. And there was some good money to be made as the governor, wasn't there? Oh, maybe you could get paid off for letting some goods sneak into the port that weren't supposed to come in. Maybe you could grant some land to people, sell it, even though you didn't have the right to sell it. A couple governors who did that. So there's always ways for governors to make a little bit of extra money by getting paid off to allow, some skirting of the rules and the laws to take place. So being the governor is not such a bad job, except maybe in New York, where everybody hates you and looks for ways to expel you from the governorship. because of that, New York's later governors were all local men who took the role as governor. As one man said, that never had a piece of land so small, caused so much misery as the damn city of New York. So always difficult to govern. We like making money in New York. I'm a merchant. I want to make money. My neighbors are merchants. They want to make money. We all want to be profitable in New York. So having a governor who is not of the mind of business and what's profitable and how to make money and how to invest money and how to make the city and the colony grow in a profitable way is not good for any of us. So we would much rather have a local gentleman who understands us be the governor than someone from England who's clueless, who's probably never worked a day in his life, as we might say, an aristocrat who's never actually had to work, governing us and just causing havoc. So that's an increasing problem that is going on. Now, even though we might be unhappy with these systems of working, or as we might say, the direct exploitation of us by the parliament, there were many ways that the parliament and that agents of the parliament and the governor here in the colonies tried to convince us that it was for our own good. So here are the things that we were told that we eventually, of course, all agreed, that we initially agreed were good things about being English colonies. So first of all, the rule of law. England brought with it the common law and the rule of law, one of the fairest legal systems at that time known in the world, right? Where you have the right of a bail hearing if you're arrested, you have a right to a trial by jury, and it's a public trial. You have property rights, different types of business rights. Your home cannot be searched without a warrant. If someone comes to search your home, they have to give you time to prepare yourself. So, if you're in your home and you're a lady and you're just lounging around and, your chemise and your stays, you have to have enough time to put on your dress or to put on your robe, your banyan, to prepare yourself to be acceptable, because, the public clothes are very different from private clothes in the 18th century, and people are just lounging around and, they need to have time to prepare themselves. So that is understood, but our homes cannot be searched without a warrant. We cannot be made to be witness against ourselves in a trial, and many things that you still enjoy today in America that come out of what is called the common law. So being governed under the common law is a very good thing, and we were all, very happy about that. Other things that we're happy about, well, the King's Navy, at least initially, is defending our ships from piracy. So the King's Navy, we're grateful to have them, right? Because they protect ships that are bringing goods for, my father's shop as it was. And by the time I own the shop, there are issues with that. But let's say when my father is owning our shop, he's very grateful for the protection of the King's Navy. And so we have that. We have the King's Army, of course, that, we thought protected us in the French and Indian War, didn't we? And many of us fought side by side with them in the French and Indian War. My father, Mr. Q's father, both fought with English soldiers in the French and Indian War, or 7 Years' War as they call it, which we believed at the time was to protect us from the French and the Huron, the tribe called Huron of natives here. It turned out later, though, that we understood it was really a territorial battle between the Huron and the Mohawk that the French and the English found it was in their interest to become involved in, because they could then ally with those tribes and whoever won expand their territory. So it really became more about France and England wanting superiority of land ownership here in the Northeast. But at first, of course, we understood that. We allied with the Mohawk tribes and with the English, and our gentlemen fought the French and Indian War. And we were very grateful to have those officers and those soldiers and those men here to lead us and to help us fight. Although you might know the story of Mrs. Schuyler, then very young Mrs. Schuyler, the former Kitty Van Rensselaer, who told a wonderful story about how at the beginning of the French Indian War, they were all sitting around with some of the local tribal leaders, and the local tribal leaders were very critical of the British and the Americans, saying, "You all sit around like women waiting for the other side to attack. Why don't you attack first?" and thought it was a silly thing that the English were just kind of waiting for this attack to come, which they thought of as being, very womanly, that the Americans and the British should get up off their rears and go bring the attack to the French and the Huron instead. So there's a very interesting story that Mrs. Schuyler tells about her memories of the French and Indian War, and her father being admonished by the local Mohawk that they were, like women just sitting around waiting to be attacked. So the French and Indian War ended with a truce between France and England, right? And then England told us, and this is where we start questioning whether or not we really do need them here. They tell us that we have to now have troops based here to continue protecting us from the French and Indians, specifically the Indians, or as the English called them, the savages on the frontier. Now, as my father tells it, and as my father-in-law, Mr. Q, tells it, there was not that much trouble between the settlers and the fur traders here and the tribal people until the English arrived and stirred up the problems. That it was a matter of coexistence, and that many of the gentlemen here spent time among the tribes, trading with them. They learned each other's languages. Some of the men of the tribes attended English schools here, Methodist and Presbyterian schools, and our gentlemen spent time in the tribes, learned their traditions, learned their languages, and people intermarried as well. And that the big problems came with the English agitating problems. For instance, English soldiers would dress up like colonists and raid a native camp, or dress up like natives and raid a colonial camp along the frontier in order to keep warfare going on the frontier. So you might say, why is it in England's interest to foment this type of warfare? Well, what if the colonies expanded beyond that frontier? What if we expanded out there? What if we became much more powerful than England by doing so? Then what would England do? It was in England's interest to keep us contained along the eastern seaboard, where we could be monitored and controlled. And you might know that England even passed rules determining what we could trade with the native tribes and how we could trade it, and that an English agent had to be present for each one of those transactions. So that's interesting, isn't it? So maybe they're not operating so much in our regard. Do we really need these soldiers here? Or are the soldiers here in the interest of England? Are the soldiers here really to keep an eye on us, to make sure we don't act out of line? So that's our first question. And that comes with something called the Stamp Act and the Quartering Act, where we question the direct taxation of us in order to support the English army, which we feel we don't really need here in such great numbers, and that England should take them back and only send them here in the case of a war. And if they leave us alone, we won't have any wars. So that's when we first start questioning the need for them. And you might know that the big questioning comes with the Tea Act. This is when we start really wondering, although I should back up a little bit, because the Tea Act isn't until 1773. But in the year 1769, a full 4 years before that, our great captain and merchant Alexander McDougall addressed the gentlemen at the Chamber of Commerce, my father then being present, and asked the gentlemen, why do we need England? What does the Parliament really do for us? All they do is enslave us by taxing the wealth that we ourselves have created here and limiting the amount of wealth we can acquire. He says, look around us. We are proof of what can be attained through hard work and determination. Because you see, although the crown claimed that all of our success here was due to their nurturing and their support and their caring and everything about us, they didn't nurture us. They didn't support us. They extracted from us, right? They exploited and took from us. So that really wasn't very true, was it? Captain McDougall said that the Parliament was a distant, uninvolved government that knew nothing of our way of life. Oh, and I think he added corrupt in there as well. He said they know nothing of our way of life here. And one of the gentlemen asked Captain McDougall that question, if we don't have the King's great navy to protect our ships at sea, who will protect them? And Captain McDougall said, if you don't fly the king's flag, his enemies no longer will be yours. Getting people to think about that maybe the problem with piracy on the high seas was not that we were American colonists, but that we were flying the British flag. And that if we were neutral in matters of state, our ships might be safe. No one ever thought of that before. So gentlemen started thinking about that. Maybe that's true. Maybe the idea that we need the British Navy to protect our ships is an idea placed in our minds by the British to make us need them or believe we need them. And how many other ways do we maybe not need them? And when we looked around, and particularly we looked at our rural areas, and we looked at our beautiful productive Hudson Valley, New Jersey, Long Island. Well, the Crown and the Parliament had nothing to do with the success of those farms. Hold on a moment, someone has entered the waiting room, okay? They had nothing to do with the success of those farms. And there was a speech even in England where Prime Minister Lord North stood up and said the colonies are what they are. They're successful the way they are because we have nurtured and protected them and nurtured them and grew them up in the English way. And a member of the House of Commons, Isaac Barrett, got up and he said, nurtured them. He said, the colonies are what they are because we have ignored them. Perhaps you've heard the term salutary neglect, which was the policy that the Crown mostly had toward us. They were solicitous to us, but they mostly neglected us, except for the ways in which they could make money on us. Otherwise, we did as we pleased here. We made our own laws, we had our own courts, we did our own thing. In your terminology, you might say. England only got involved when they needed something from us. So Isaac Barrett continued, he said, the true sons of liberty are those gentlemen, those men and women who have risked their lives to go there and build what they have. And how do you think the Sons of Liberty got their name? From Isaac Barrett's great speech. Now, some of you in Pennsylvania know a town named Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, named for John Wilkes and Isaac Barrett, the two radical Whigs in the Parliament, two of them in the House of Commons that supported us. So it was his famous speech, which I think got him fined for breaking some rule in the Parliament. Who knows? He either was fined or he might have been expelled or people might have walked out or, whatever they did in England. I don't know. Whatever they did to show their discontent. But the Sons of Liberty took their name from that wonderful speech. And so with those speeches, we all started questioning, are we what we are because of England? Or are we what we are because of ourselves? England had a bit of a mental edge over us because the people who came here from England and around Europe were all from the class, well, most of us, from the class called peasants. My father wasn't. Mr. Q's father was. Mostly from a class called peasants, who, of course, according to the upper classes on the other side of the Atlantic, can't achieve anything without the guidance of aristocrats, correct? But if peasants all came to America and built the great American colonies, whoa, maybe we don't need those aristocrats anymore. And trust me, there were aristocrats here in the colonies who were very interested in making us continue to believe that we needed them also for our success. But increasingly, small farmers, artisans, dock workers, laborers, you call them, all started seeing that the success wasn't because of them. Sometimes success was hindered by them, right? Because they owned so much land and controlled so much and often controlled the government that what they did was not in the interest of the working people here, but in their own interest. And in that way, some divisions started growing and questions about, maybe because we all come from a tradition of peasantry, we ourselves don't understand what we're capable of. But now that we look around and we see it ourselves, we're becoming more aware of what we can do ourselves without the need of an upper class or an aristocracy to finance or guide us. And things began to change as people here began to see what they truly were capable of. And then, of course, the Tea Act came along. And in the Tea Act, of course, it was what you would call a bailout. We don't have that word in my time. We would call a rescue. like that, an accommodation for the British East India Company, which was bankrupt, about to bankrupt London, and had tons of rotting tea in the warehouses in England. They also had many, let's say, members of parliament that they patronized. You might say paid off or bought off, but definitely bribes were paid. And the parliament then passed legislation favoring the East India Company. I should not leave out the banks at this point either, because the East India Company was financed by the Bank of London, which had then issued more types of investments on those investments, and that was all about to fall apart as well. So the parliament says, okay, we'll have the East India Company sell their tea in America free of tariffs. It will then be the cheapest tea in America. Everyone will be happy to buy it, and it will rescue the East India Company. And it was passed with the objections of some very smart people in the parliament, but it was passed. And we read it here, and immediately the propaganda started flowing here. I should say, in my time, the word propaganda doesn't exist yet. In your time, it does. Let's say the false information or the misleading information, evil information started circulating here. The idea being that we were everything we were because we were a part of England. And that if the East India Company failed, England would fail. The whole empire would fail. There would be no one to take care of us. There would be no one to defend us. There would be no one to finance us and come to our aid and help us poor American children in our time of need. And some people believed it, but a lot of people didn't believe it, right? Many people didn't believe it. And one gentleman even said in a broadside, if the East India Company fails, the entire British Empire will fail. And as good subjects of the crown, patriotic subjects of the crown, grateful to all you have because of England, we know you'll buy the tea. And we didn't buy the tea. The Dutch tea was just as good. And besides, it hadn't been rotting in the warehouses for forever the way that English tea was. And we bought the Dutch tea, and even though it was more expensive, because we realized that we were being badly used at that time, that we were being exploited, that what they believed to be our ignorance about our abilities would get us to believe this false rescue of the East India Company. Why should we rescue the East India Company? Let the aristocrats in England bail them out. They're all invested in them. They all profit from them. Let them find a way to bail them out, not the hardworking people of America. And of course, we heard some of this dialogue during the Stamp Act as well. If you recall, let them pay for the military, not us. The parliament can't tax us directly. They can't take money from us and spend it any way in which they please. It's not allowed. We have no representation in parliament, was the argument during the Stamp Act. And you might remember when we united against England and refused to trade with them, it was economic devastation for England. So we did come to recognize our financial power over the crown, but we still hadn't fully come into the knowledge of our full power over the crown. That all of us had a way of uniting as farmers, as dock workers, as artisans, as lawyers, as merchants, dressmakers, tailors, hairdressers. All of us together created our own economy, free of the limits on manufacturing of England. If we did not have those limits and could make everything ourselves, we would be able to make things in abundance, more than we needed, enough to sell to other places and compete with England. Of course, England didn't want that, but slowly we came to realize that if we did that, we might be more powerful than England one day. And so we resisted the Tea Act. And England, now understanding our power, punished us, didn't they? They shut down the port at Boston. They took away Boston's civilian government. They replaced it with a military government. And at that time, divided the colonies again, because some of the colonies felt Boston deserved it for what they did. That Boston had destroyed the private property of the East India Company and was being rightfully punished for that. And we had other colonies that said, regardless of what Boston did, the crown had no right to withdraw their colonial charter given to them when they were founded, and that the crown had overstepped its rights over the colonies. So this divided us for some time as well. And I can tell you my own personal opinion about this division is not so much that the people who were against Boston really were against Boston. It was more that they were afraid themselves of having to fight the crown. So in the event Mrs. Van R is listening, I will refrain from calling them filthy cowards. Oh, wait, I did. So I would say that those colonies were filled with cowards who wanted the easy life, believing that England really protected them. Because it's easier. It's just easier to live under the protection of the government, even if they're exploiting you, than to rise up and do battle with that government. And I think Thomas Jefferson may have said that in his Declaration, right? That people are prone to live under an evil system simply because they're accustomed to it. And that the idea of rising up against that system and fighting it is just too frightening. So they'll just go ahead with it and go ahead with it on and on and on until they lose all of their rights and freedoms, until they're completely oppressed. And this was where we found ourselves, with some of us saying, we cannot let this go on because eventually we will have no rights here. You know, we will all be peasants of the British aristocracy, or we can take the chance and fight against this growing evil that's oppressing us and see if we can become something better. And I'll tell you, everyone, it was not very easy. Many of our friends felt otherwise. People on both sides felt that the other side was deranged, felt that the other side was misled. And I know you might find this incredibly hard to believe, but each side felt that there were more dangerous radicals on the other side. So my loyalist friends felt that there were more dangerous members of the Sons of Liberty on that other side, and my rebel friends felt that there were more dangerous, hardcore Tories on the other side. Interesting, isn't it? Each side felt the other side had more dangerous people associated with them. Each side tended to reject anything the other side said simply because it came from the other side. You know, oh, well, you're a Tory. Why would I listen to you? Tories are all cowards. You know, Tories would rather live under oppression than fight for something better for their children. Why would I listen to you? You're just a lazy Tory who wants the government to take care of you. Or, oh, you're a crazy rebel. You're not grateful for what the government has done for you. You're not patriotic. You're trying to get rid of the very government who has done so many good things for you. Why would I listen to you? You crazy radicals, you crazy rebels who want to separate from the crown, the greatest empire in the world. Maybe so. Maybe we could create something better. And both sides went back and forth. And it got bitter. People didn't speak to each other. Family members didn't speak to each other. Eventually, family members fought on opposite sides of the war. One brother an officer for the crown, and another brother an officer for the colonies. We had that with Gouverneur Morris and his brother Stotts. Fought on opposite sides. Wasn't unusual. Ladies, sisters, married to gentlemen who fought on opposite sides and found themselves unable to communicate with each other. Families broken up. It was not unusual. Each side was sure that they were right. And many people who were on the loyalist side really didn't have any personal love for the crown or the parliament. They just felt that it was the best system, that the British system was the best, that they were the fairest treated. Now, honestly, as British colonists, we did have the best life of most colonists in the world because they had neglected us and we governed ourselves. And since we were of the British tradition, we already believed in representative government and we were functional in that way. So we did have very good lives. It is true. But most of us thought we could have even better lives if we were not under dominance of England. So we argued about that. We dressed differently. How you dress now made a difference. I'm wearing tonight homemade clothes made of local cotton. Homespun, we might call it. All local cottons I'm wearing, all local clothes for you tonight. But at that time, a lady might still be wearing her silks or her linens or her broadcloth from England with English designs. And the ladies would not speak to each other. If you wore homespun, if you wore English, we didn't speak to each other. We didn't go to the same coffee houses. The gentlemen wore wigs or did not wear wigs, and they didn't attend the same taverns, and they didn't go to the same associations. So we became divided in that way that even, I know you probably think this is so ridiculous and hard to believe, but even what you wore, where you ate, and what you drank became a political statement. I know you think we're ridiculous for doing that. I'm sure you would never do that again. It must sound ridiculous to you. And in a way, it even seems ridiculous to me as it was so many years ago, but it was true. It really happened. Even what store you shopped in. If you went to Mrs. Q's, who everyone knew, were rebels, you might shop or not shop at Mrs. Q's because my and Mr. Q's political affiliation. You might instead go to Mr. Ackerman, my friend Mr. James Ackerman. You might go to Mr. Ackerman's down the street because you know he's a loyalist. You know he's a Tory. You might not shop with me. You might go to Mr. Ackerman. Or, you might throw a rock through Mr. Ackerman's window because he's a loyalist. Or you might not do that to me because you're afraid of the Sons of Liberty. But remember, although we did have the Sons of Liberty, and many people called them terrorists and would not associate with them or anyone who associated with them or were close to them, two iterations away, right? So you have the Sons of Liberty, their close friends, and then friends of their friends, right? Would not associate with anyone along that line. Remember, the Tories had the military on their side. They had the soldiers here on their side. They had writs to inspect people's homes and harass them. They had writs to confiscate things, confiscate goods. They said they were illegal. They boarded our ships at sea, didn't they? They boarded their ships and inspected them and confiscated goods that were not supposed to be on the ships, they would say. That led to a big incident in Rhode Island. Maybe I'll speak about one night, the Gaspé incident. Some of you may know about that. What else did they do? They stole our men off of ships and forced them to serve in the British Navy. So although people said that we had the Sons of Liberty who were a threat to their safety, they had the armed British Navy and Army on their side. That was the biggest threat to our lives and our safety, weren't they? Especially when they invaded Massachusetts and in the summer of 1776 invaded New York. Remember, that's all before the Declaration of Independence. Don't forget, the invasion came first, then the Declaration came. So don't let the English trick you into thinking that it was a result of our rebellion. They invaded first, we then rebelled and declared our independence. Though they've tried to trick you into thinking otherwise, but it's not true. So these are the ways in which we became so terribly divided, right? We wouldn't shop in each other's stores. We judged people by what they wore, what fabrics they wore, what shoes they wore, how they wore their hair, whether or not they wore a wig, what food they ate, what tavern they drank in. Did you drink, whiskey that came from the British Empire, or did you drink the whiskey that was brewed in the Carolinas? Where did your rum come from? Did it come from New England, or did it come from a British island in the Caribbean? It all came to make a difference. I know, as ridiculous as it sounds, even among the ladies, did you serve the English tea or did you serve the Dutch tea? You could always lie because they tasted the same. No one really knew the difference. But people would put the tea canister out, or actually the tea kind of came in a brick and it came in a wrapper. It wasn't really a canister at that time, but people would put the wrapper out on display to show that the tea was not the English tea, that it was the Dutch tea instead. So I know it all seems so ridiculous, doesn't it? That neighbors and friends and family members would turn against each other, over politics, but it did happen. And we fought a war about it, didn't we? Many of us switched sides as the war began. More people came over to our side, but it didn't matter because the British had their great army and navy, didn't they? And they still lost, didn't they? Because they could only lose. Because who can take away from a people what they themselves have built? What they, husbands and wives, grandparents, children, cousins, aunts, uncles, what they themselves with their own hands, with their own hard work have built. Earth that they dug and planted and harvested, animals they raised and then used for food, for skins, for bowls, for combs, for everything. How can you take that away from people? They will fight until the last person is left alive, people who have built what they have themselves. So it's important that you never come to believe that the government can do more for you than you can do for yourselves. But you must be united. You must drop your petty differences and unite with your neighbors over the important things so that you can have freedom from that oppressive government in order to go back to arguing. And you know the story. Right after the American Revolution, we all started arguing with each other again, didn't we? New England didn't like anybody else. Nobody else liked New England. New York didn't like anyone. Nobody liked New York. The Southerners were back together. Nobody liked them. And right after the war, we were right back to arguing. But you know what? Now we were arguing as the United States of America. We were arguing as our own country, and we had the ability to work out our own problems ourselves without a massive oppressive government. And that is the most important thing, that you can govern yourselves. Otherwise, that big government will take more and more money. It will become more and more corrupt. It will lie more and more about how much you need it to survive. It will use every tactic and technique possible to make you believe it, especially preying on your own, your own insecurities or your own fears of inability, your own fears that maybe you can't make it on your own. Maybe you can't protect your own ships. Maybe you can't handle your own farms. Maybe you can't govern yourselves. Maybe you can't have a financial system yourselves. Maybe you don't know how to do that. Maybe you can't have peace with the tribes. All of these things, I'll plant them all in your mind so that they're back there and you'll be just a little bit afraid of stepping over that line. But, look to your brave neighbors who are willing to take that chance and join with them. And that's what we did. And we defeated the greatest empire of our time, didn't we? And built what you have in the future. So I hope you enjoyed my little piece about the way the government tries to brainwash you into thinking you need them when you probably really don't. So thank you all for joining me. And I'm going to look a little bit at some of the, oh no, someone said that this whole story doesn't sound far off from your time. Oh, Mrs. Healy is giving me your symbol in the future for yes. So I think some of you think that. Franklin and his loyalist son, Mr. Franklin's story is among one of the saddest, isn't it? Mr. Franklin's son accompanied him on his trips to England, assisted him in his experiments, and then Mr. Franklin voted to have him arrested and jailed as the royal governor when William was the royal governor of New Jersey. Must have been very difficult and painful for Mr. Franklin to go through that, and for his son as well. Yes, the East India Company was, Mr. Linden says, too big to fail. Indeed, too big to fail. Something else that's not new. And the McCabe's say to me, there is nothing new under the sun, my dear Mrs. Q. Excellent presentation. Thank you. Indeed, there is nothing new under the sun. Thank you so much for watching. Maybe one night I'll talk about the Real Housewives of Colonial New York. Maybe you'd like to hear about them. Someone said, true, Mrs. McCabe. Someone is answering on Zoom that Mrs. McCabe is correct. There's nothing new under the sun. That there isn't. I tell you, if you study my time, you'll see so much of your time in it, and you'll learn so much. Learn from our mistakes. You'll learn from what we did. That's why the past is here. People are wishing me good travels and enjoy Puppy Q. Yes, we will. We can't wait to pick him up. And of course, when I join you in, let me look at my little calendar here. When is the next time I'll see you? Oh my gosh, July 1st? Could that be true? July 1st. So when I see you on July 1st, he will be with me. So I'll pick him up so you can meet him. For those of you who want to come out and see me live and in person, my next appearance is July 9th. It's a Saturday. It's in coordination with Francis Tavern Museum. It's a big tour about 1776 the battle for New York, the Declaration of Independence, and all the great stuff going on then. And it is taking place on the very day the Declaration was read and the statue of King George was destroyed. I forgot to look to see if tickets are on sale on their website yet, and you can go over and see if they're there. I'm not sure. When I have the link, I'll definitely be posting it. And if you're in the New York area, come out. I think the tour is from 11 to 1 on Saturday, July 9th. Come out and enjoy an afternoon with me. I think this is what I'm going to wear that day. Nice summer outfit. I think I'll be wearing this. And, come out, and I won't be able to wear my Madison locket, though, because in 1776, no one knew who he was yet. So I won't be able to wear him. Here by James Madison. So I'll be out, and just as a hint, you might be seeing Mr. Q and a brief appearance of Dog Q on July 9th, picking me up at the end of the tour. So you might get a chance to meet little Quintus Q for a few minutes on that tour. So keep that in mind. If you have any questions, just let me know. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you in 2 weeks with the Queens Public Library and 3 weeks back here in my garden. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate it. Have a great couple weeks till I see you again. And I'll see lots of you on social media. Have a good night.